Well, hello and welcome to Chapter 3. We're here to talk about adding transitions, post effects, and graphics in your 360 VR workflows in this chapter. If you've been continuing with me from Chapter 2, you can continue with the actual sequence that you're working with. And if you're just jumping in right now, there's a bunch of exercise files that you can download directly from metal.com. And inside the project that's included in this course, it's the Intro to 360 Metal Chapter 2, 5, and on. You can double-click the Chapter 3_1 sequence inside the sequences bin found in the project panel. So let's get started. Let's understand how transitions work inside of Premiere Pro before we start to add Metal's beautiful transitions designed for 360 VR workflow. We add transitions from an area called the Effects tab. We can call up the Effects tab by going to the Window menu and choosing Effects. And you'll see here that it populates on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Another way to work with this is to actually go to the Effects Workspace. So you'll see all my workspaces here in my CC 2017. I'll click on the Effects Workspace, and all of a sudden I've got my Effects tab now populated here on the right. This is a good place for it to be because although it's populated on the right, I also get these effect controls which can allow me to manipulate the transitions or effects that I add onto clips inside my sequence. So what you need to know about transitions is that they're applied to edit points on clips. And we discussed edit points earlier when we discussed trimming inside of the timeline. There's a relationship between the A side and B side of the edit. So if I move my playhead here we got the A side and the B side. What I'd like to do is add a transition like a cross dissolve between them. So I can go to my video transitions category, and under that category are a series of subcategories. If we look into the dissolve category, you'll see a cross dissolve, and it's highlighted in blue because it's the default transition. There's something extremely special about this because we can actually add this one dissolve with a keyboard shortcut. How it works is we can just simply select it and then apply it over the edit point of a clip. As long as our clips have appropriate handles, a 1-second transition is going to be added. And you can, of course, select that transition. And some of these transitions actually have effect controls, which are now showing to you in the top left-hand corner because we're in the Effects Workspace. For some reason, if it's not showing those effect controls, simply press Shift-5 to bring them up after you've clicked on the transition. In this window, first of all, you can see the lovely A-B button, and I can show the sources of the clips that I'm currently using inside my sequence. I can also change the duration in this particular case. So I want to type in 1:15 to have a 1 second and 15 frame duration, and you'll see that that extends quite a bit. So now I have a lovely cross dissolve between these two clips. Now there's one warning that I have for you, and that is when a clip on either the end, the out point, or the end point doesn't have handles. There's actually a little symbol to let you know this. You can see that two of my clips have these triangles on the top left-hand corner. The last clip in my timeline, and actually the first clip in my timeline. And this is a symbol to say, hey, there are no frames to the left of me towards the edit decision I made in the timeline. There's nothing to access. And in this case, what happens is something that could be problematic. Transitions need to adapt because there's no frames to essentially transition to the left of your edit decision. So if I applied a cross dissolve in this case, you'll notice that it's somewhat limiting. It's not allowing me to put it on the center of these two clips. And it's actually starting on the edit point. And the reason it's doing that is I just don't have an appropriate amount of handles in order to perform the transition. In other cases, for some reason, if you didn't have handles on your outgoing clip and your incoming clip, what you would see is Premiere Pro would want to repeat frames there in your timeline. So notice just the difference of me adding this here over the third and second last clip versus the second and last clip in the timeline. So just something to note, you want to have handles for your clips. So in cases that you don't have handles and you want to add transitions to avoid repeated frames, in this particular case, before I start to trim here in the timeline, I would want to lock my audio track to prevent changes. And then I could use my default selection tool, which I've reversed in an earlier movie to perform something like a ripple trim, and then add. As I know, the default transition is a second long, just a little bit after 25 frames. All right, now with that extra transitions, when I apply the cross dissolve this time, I'm able to have a center on edit transition. One other thing about transitions is The default transition can be added to multiple clips at once. So an example of this is if I pressed Control A, okay, and I actually go to the sequence menu, you'll see that I can apply the default transition to the current selection. What this is going to do is I'm going to have cross dissolves over all of those clips at once. This is really important to remember because when we start to deal with Metal's SkyBox 360 VR transitions, we're going to be able to switch one of those to the default transition and add them to all of our clips at once. If you'd like to see some transitions that do have controls, you can select something from the iris category. In fact, I'm going to go here and select the iris round just before we close this out and add it to the second last clip. When I add it, in this case, it's going to replace the existing transition. Notice that when I add the iris, this is not an effect that is ready to be rendered by the system, hence the red line, so I'll have to render it out. But when I select it, in the effect controls with my playhead over it, I get a series of controls. And with my actual sources showing, I can change where the iris takes place. I can also reverse the transition, as you can see. I could add a border color. And if I scroll down even further, there are additional options that you can use for this round iris. I'll see you guys in the next movie where we're going to discuss the limitations of the built-in transitions from Premiere when we're working with 360 VR footage.